Okay, so welcome everybody. This is me and Anna Pego. Anna had this wonderful idea for a presentation, and I was so excited about it when she brought it to us. My name is Pamela LiVecchi. I'm a lecturer in the psychology department. I've been at John Jay for almost 15 years now. I'm also a clinical psychologist and do clinical psychology things outside of John Jay.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Super happy to be here with all of you. Like Pamela was saying, we had this idea, we got talking after the Distinguished Teaching Prize got us together, so that was super cool. And my name is Anna Pego, I'm in the Sciences Department, and I've been at John Jay for only 4 years. So it's nice also to have um, these different experiences also related with time. So before we get into our actual session of today, we would like to ask everyone if you can please just unmute yourself, tell us your name and your department.
I could start us off. Good morning, everyone. I'm an adjunct in the forensic psychology department, and I'm also full-time staff with UGF as a community lead.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Jess.
I'll go next. Hi, Monica Matisse. I'm in the science department with Anna. Yay!
Thank you for being here, Monica.
Good morning.
Hi, I'm Allison Pease. I'm the provost.
Welcome, Allison.
Hi, Alison.
Hi, I'm Aaron Feynman. I'm the Director of Web Services working in the Communications and Marketing Department.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Anna, also Department of Sciences. I just started this year
Oh, welcome
as
to
a
John.
lecturer. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Cal Vestal Register. I'm an assistant professor in the public management department.
Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kendra Deutschek from the Psychology Department.
Hi, Kendra.
Good morning, everyone. I'm an adjunct lecturer starting this spring, and I'm from the Law and Police Department.
Welcome. Hmm.
Yeah.
Mindy, we can't hear you. Sorry. And
Better now?
yes.
Yeah.
So much for technology. Mindy Wapner, psychology adjunct. Been with the department since 2000. So,
Welcome.
Hi, Mindy.
And then Zabby just came in, and then there's Lorena, I think that just left. Oh, hi, Lorena. Oh, okay. Welcome. She's a teaching assistant. Wonderful. Welcome, Zabby. Can you just say the department that you're from?
History.
Wonderful. Okay. I think we have everybody.
I think so.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So let us begin. So the title we came up with is Different Lenses, Shared Goals, because we thought we actually should take advantage of the knowledge that we have at John Jay. We have professors and staff from all sorts of different backgrounds. And we thought, why not get that sort of interdisciplinary knowledge together? Of course, in the pursuit of justice, at the end, we are in the College of Criminal Justice. So we want to keep this kind of informal. So just feel free to unmute yourself and talk whenever you feel like. So our proposal is to indeed get different subjects together and learn from each other and teach our students also different experiences. So we sometimes see that we tend to stay like, I speak for myself in the sciences department, and I'm not sure Hannah and Monica feel the same, but maybe you feel a little bit of an enclosed box. And there is a lot more beyond our subject. And many times we actually, in our professional lives, have to get together with people from different departments and having different expertise. So in our case, those different expertise within the sciences department, I teach forensic toxicology. And then we thought to join that together with psychology. And where could we find that middle ground, right? Where can we find this shared knowledge that we could also use that to teach something else to our students, right? And bring them different perspectives. So it's a kind of outside inside knowledge because it's still inside of John Jay, but it's outside of our department. So our proposal was to co-taught a class and of course starting easy, no panic, one per semester, just really bringing together those two different subjects. And in our case, that's again forensic toxicology and psychology. So we believe these two, we actually found a lot of things we could benefit from one another. And actually we found out that Pamela has already experience in those, so I'll let her take it from here.
So these are, okay, so I'm going to share some examples. I've already done some co-teaching a few times in some different ways. So I'm going to give a brief synopsis of what I've done as a kind of examples. And because I've done one of them at least over time, I have some feedback for what worked or what could be a little better. So the first one, it was titled Intro Across the Ocean. This was pretty straightforward. I connected with a professor who's teaching at American University in Paris, and we were both teaching Introduction to Psychology. So this was a kind of easy way to bridge because we were teaching not the same content, but similar enough. And so what we did was here on the right of the screen, you could see Padlet for those of you, I don't know if you've ever used that platform before. It's super straightforward. We both asked our students to take an image or a short video depicting, demonstrating one of the concepts from the class. So all of the students took their image. I then included in my class some opportunity for peer review. So they brought it to class and their peers made comments on how they were explaining it. They posted to Padlet. They explained how they were demonstrating it, and they gave some quick kind of critical analysis at the end. Like, this is what I think, but here's maybe another idea. Once this is all finished, Paris sent their stuff to me. We sent our stuff to Paris, which was easier for me because Paris had a class of only 20 students. They had 120 of my submissions. But because I was only 20 students from them, I actually printed them, hung them around the room, and my class engaged in a kind of thematic analysis. So you can see that on the bottom left here. It's something that is a qualitative technique used in psychology where and this is like the opposite of a survey. You get to kind of look at individual perspectives and things like this. And so my students were asked to look at themes, surprising words, things like that. That was the one version. I'm doing a new version of it this semester coming up with a professor at a business school in Milan. So this is going to be different because even though it's a business school, he's teaching about culture and cinema. And so his students are going to offer images and they're going to apply some social theories he's teaching. This is going to be different because our class's content is not overlapping now. So when we swap, this is more of a learning experience, us seeing how they're, theorizing and understanding. And then my class is going to give some kind of consultation to their class. Like, oh, this is another way of looking at what you're doing from a psychological perspective. And they're just going to comment on the Padlets. That's it. The next one is one I did last semester. This is the CJ Psych project, and that's the image in the center. These were two capstone classes. So these were two senior classes. This was my psychology ethics capstone class and Anila Duro's CJ capstone class. This was different for multiple reasons, but the end product was our students together presenting their capstone projects in one room, which is what you see here. This was a little bit more complex. And so in this case, my students sent an article to the other class for them to read what they were looking at. My students then went to their class and presented their idea and said, for 5 minutes, this is what we're planning on doing. What's your reaction to it? And their class was like, it makes me think of this. It makes me think of that. These were criminal justice students. My students took notes. They then returned to my class and adjusted their projects accordingly based on the feedback. They had more independence with that project too. And then finally, this semester, I'm doing an oral history project, and this is different again. It's my Intro to Psych class, which is 120 students, Carla Batres's class, which is, I think, like 36, and then Mayowa Basaju's online class, which I don't know what the online classes are for intro, if they're 30 or what they are. And we're connecting with a high school class in Newark, New Jersey. We're all collecting oral histories. But we're collaborating in different ways. So the high school students are taking the themes and they're suggesting the questions that are asked. For those of you who don't know what oral history is basically a structured interview for gathering detailed information from one person's experience. So the high school class is going to, suggest the questions that we ask. They're going to send it to us. We're going to refine them. We're all going to collect. And then the college students are going to engage in some form of analysis on this and then share that with the high schoolers and back and forth a little bit. So these are the ones that I've done already. These are just some examples.
Thank you, Pamela. So as you can see, Pamela has a lot of experience on this. So it was actually a perfect match for the topic. And one of our suggestions on how to do this, apart from what Pamela already mentioned, is obviously faculty must meet in advance, check their curricula, identify points for this interdisciplinary framing, right? We have to discuss what are things that could overlap. And sometimes it's surprising also, like when fields that are completely different, but it is possible to find a connecting thread. And I think that's also one of the very special things at John Jay with all these different disciplines that we have. Of course, it must be meaningful, it must make sense. We also should clearly explain the purpose of this collaboration to the students. So while discussing this faculty development day session, Pamela mentioned it can bring frustration sometimes if students think that the other class is having less to do or their type of assignments are easier in a way or they have to spend less time doing it. So that's something that we must align with the students. So let also the students take ownership, what would maybe they would like to see. And this is going to be different for intro levels or 400 levels. So it is important to manage those expectations. We also suggest to create kind of a timeline. So as we said before, maybe we can start with one class per semester, see where that would make sense. So perhaps mid-semester where they already learned a lot about the subject where they are. And then see whether we could maybe create an assignment which would be fair and again, that would make sense for everyone. So it's important also to set expectations that are transparent across the courses because students, they quickly notice these inequities. So it's also important to keep everyone interested and happy with the exchange. At the end of the day, that's what we want. And to create these connections across classes. So like Pamela mentioned before, this can maybe be done online. There's platforms to do that. Can be physical visits if that's feasible, if both professors are teaching in person and there is that possibility of merging the classes once. And one of the forms we thought about this, for example, in science, since we deal a lot with numbers and it's all a little bit less abstract, we thought, for example, to deal with cases, have a case and get information and knowledge from both sides, but we will get into that a little bit later. So I'll let Pamela mention the co-teaching moments.
So this could kind of easily happen through something like Padlet, where the posts are shared. So I would suggest keeping them on totally separate Padlets and giving the students the link for the other and allowing them to comment on the other groups. That's maybe the easiest way to do this between classes. The students, the senior students, reflected that they enjoyed physically going to the other class. Even though they were like representatives for their groups, I think it felt like a kind of new, interesting, and I really pitched it as like a professional development skill, and I explained the importance of this and what they could get from it, and they were kind of into that. So this semester, I'm actually going to grab some of my intro students and go physically into another intro class and see if they like that. In terms of the level appropriate contributions, the thing I'll note here is we all know this for like the 100 or 200 level classes, it just requires much more clarity and maybe even like direct examples of what we're looking for. Because this is a different type of project, it requires more work for us on the front end as the professors, and then much more question answering as we go. And because of that, I would suggest lightening our load for grading by making things very straightforward, like a straightforward rubric. We're asking you to do these 3 things. It's not overly complex on our end at the back end, having it be structured that way, and appropriate for their level, because the seniors can take independence and modify what they're doing maybe in order to meet the goal. But the freshmen, I think it's important to have it really direct. That's just my experience. But the benefit to this is a real beautiful way of knowledge production. So this is kind of to the contrary of the professor dictating down, what you should know. These are students in the center sharing basically sideways with one another from their perspective, how they understand things, reflecting back. I mean, this is like real professional development skills, but it's also a beautiful way of engaging with information, either within or across the disciplines. There's also the option for voice recording. You can record things and add that to Padlet. That could be another way of sharing.
And talking about sharing, perhaps one of the things that we discussed, Pamela, is how, for example, psychology could strengthen, in this case, forensic toxicology. I don't know if
yeah, I mean, this was interesting to me. This piqued my interest because I think quickly and have quick ideas. And when I thought, oh, forensic toxicology, and nothing came to mind. I didn't know how psychology could interact with that. But thinking about it a little further, if you're either examining humans or you're a human yourself, it all has to do with psychology. So I think if we push like a little further into our discipline, we could think about how we could apply our version of ideas to another group's version of ideas. So we could think about the examiner themselves or who they're examining.
And the other way around, how can forensic toxicology aid psychology? Well, is more so from a background of when we think about also professionally speaking, if you're doing analysis and tests the whole day, you can become rather looking at this really just like a sample and not thinking about the human being behind it. And that can bring a lot of biases, for example. And sometimes we have seen already that the existence of bias in science as a whole. So perhaps, of course, psychology could bring this into sciences, and then science can bring the whole part of analytical findings. Maybe sometimes talking about toxicology specifically, it is very important to know if the person is perhaps under the influence of a certain substance, which could explain maybe certain behaviors. And this is something that pharmacologically speaking can bring us some more clarity. So it's more so from the perspective of bringing that scientific knowledge about intoxication, withdrawal symptoms, polysubstance use, which we tend to see a lot and can help maybe strengthen the interpretation of cognition and how it can affect memory, for example. So again, like we said before, we thought, okay, could we actually apply this to some real case scenarios? So for example, bring a case to both our classes and have them pitch in from their own perspective, and then try to see where they could merge their knowledge, right? Or how can they make the resolution of the case better? So one of the things we thought would be an example is cases such as drug-facilitated sexual assaults. In this type of cases, of course, toxicology will bring a result of an analysis. So many times people are tested for blood or urine. And it happens a lot that in these instances, because of many human things, right, that we not always consider in science, individuals tend to report this crime rather late. And sometimes they end up testing negative. That does not mean that they were not under the influence of a drug at the time, right? And Pamela for sure can talk better about this, how people can have the resulting of this trauma, have memory fragmentation, which many times leads especially scientists to kind of disregard the experiences of individuals who have been victims of drug-facilitated sexual assaults. So I think would be a good idea for our students to really learn from each other. And this is just an example of a case we could do together. So then we would show maybe some drugs were detected, some others were not. And then psychology will prevent discrediting these survivors in the cases of the toxicology being negative, because we always try to explain that absence of evidence is very different from the evidence of absence. Not always because a toxicology test is negative means that nothing was there, and therefore we should just discredit the report from this individual. And just overall really make us more human and more approachable and more and really see the person behind a sample. So that is our experience, let's say, in a way, or what we have discussed, and potential collaborations between our fields. And what we would like to suggest is that we kind of separate now into our own breakout sessions and ask you if you can find some middle ground amongst your disciplines. What could be something that you think would be interesting for your students to learn? And is it an idea, maybe, Pamela, like we said before, that we ask for one person in this session to be like a spokesperson so that later we can all get together and see what we have learned?
And I'll suggest too, so in some ways you could think about this really practically. So how could a future professional, incorporate this information? But we could think about it too, just the act of asking yourself to think outside of your discipline is really, really, really important. I can speak from, I used to work in a hospital setting, and I know what it's like to walk into a hospital room and question someone with my psychology agenda, but without having an understanding of what's going on in their body or the medicine, which is totally outside of my field. Maybe I would ask the questions differently or think differently. So maybe even, we're training our future students to go on and become researchers in a lab. But if we're only asking them to stay in their bubble, they might not ask the better questions. We're training them to think and ask the same questions we've already been thinking and asking about. So even if it feels like an artificial intellectual exercise, I think there's value to that. So to think super flexibly about the overlap in the assignments. So we're actually from all different disciplines in here. So Bruce, if you're here, you could go into just random breakout rooms. I think that's actually okay. We don't have a lot of people from the same
Sure.
department.
Hi, everyone. How was it? Did you have fun? Cool.
Yes, indeed.
Do the spokespersons of each breakout session want to share a little bit of what you talked about?
I can go first for our group. So we were in room one. So I was with Cal, Allison, Katora, and Christina. So Cal is in the kind of fraud examination field, and then I teach biology and I do forensic entomology. And then Christina is in kind of law and police science, but she's going to be teaching research methods and data analysis. And then Allison is English, and then Katura does more financial. How would you describe your field?
Philanthropy.
Philanthropy. Okay. I love that. And we came up with an idea of communicating different types of data through different means. So visual data visualization and communicating different types of data to different types of audiences. And the assignment that we kind of came up with, or a more concrete idea, um, was kind of looking at fraud examination in the food supply chain, specifically where insects may be penetrating into the food supply chain. And that could be like agriculture, in food supply chain, like in a factory, things along those lines. And then I think Christina can come in here on the kind of more law enforcement side and explaining kind of the vulnerabilities to the law enforcement and the more legal side of things. Hopefully I summarized that well.
Wow, impressive. Okay, then I see you guys already are ready to go. You can start tomorrow. Cool, very cool. Thank you so much, Anna. And we have another one, I believe the one with Monica. Do you guys have a spokesperson?
I don't think we have a spokesperson, do we? No, we don't have a spokesperson. Okay, great. I like when everyone just goes no. We actually discussed a few things because we had 3 psychology people in ours. And so there was a few things discussed. So anyone feel like they want to jump in, let me know. But there were things that I actually related to you, Anna, because my background is more in toxicology also. And we were saying how I liked how you guys talked about bringing the perspective of the person in, right? And I was saying like I actually see it from the other side of like when you're doing the analysis, you can't think about the person because you can't, right? And then we were talking about communication and whatever, and I was saying that when we go to testify, if we're training, like we're training our students, um, when we testify, we have psychological issues too, like us personally as the scientist, right? And so you have to get up on the stand and deal with people saying things to you that they attack your character, they attack your knowledge, they attack, and so there's a lot of that we as a scientist have to deal with. So we not only do we have to communicate, but we have to, know ourselves and be secure in ourselves in that. So that became like a part of the conversation also that we were having. And then just looking at different aspects of, removing the student from, like Mindy has an online class. So she was saying how she'll take her students out and bring them, to different courts and see different initiatives that are going on. And so we were talking about the psychological side of that also. So that was kind of a thing that came up in ours. So we kind of were touching more different things than, really like coming up with one assignment, but a lot to be discussed.
Yeah, of course. And it's very cool that you brought up that point because, yeah, it's true. We are also humans, and especially when you're doing a testimony in court, yeah, it's very hostile environment, can be a very hostile environment. And I think that's also something we could bring up to the students, right? Like that side of that you should also pay attention to. Cool. Thank you so much, Monica and the group. And then we had our breakout session room. So I will let Lorena.
Hi, everyone. So I had Professor Pego and Professor LiVecchi and also Zavi. So Zavi is from the history department. I work with Professor Rory, that's in the Latin American Studies department, and she has a legal law background. I have a political science background. So we discussed about how these sort of different fields intersect with one another and how sometimes we might not be aware of how history is connected to like how a test is or procedure is being done now, or in the legal system, how laws might be implemented differently for different populations, and there's the power of discretion and also ambiguity and bias as well. So normally sometimes with Professor Rory, I usually help her try to introduce more political science and social scientists readings so students can have a more holistic picture of whatever theme that we're discussing that week. It could be, gender or domestic violence. So and then we also talked about Padlet, which I think Professor Pego and LiVecchi will cover as well for everybody.
Thank you, Lorena.
And I was also excited the idea, because Abby was talking about history, and I said, just the idea of being in psychology and talking about a theory or an event, and then having history come in and say, "Can I tell you what was going on in the world at that time?" Broader outside of psychology. And that could apply to I was even thinking English. You're reading something, and then could you come in and give the full context to what was going on in the world at that time? I don't know, that's really exciting. I just added a link to a Padlet here. So this one could be an example for us even. Zabby was even saying, like, who would I link with? Well, I don't know, we're here. So if anyone's interested in doing these types of collaborations, we could add our name and our department and our contacts here, and we could think about this stuff together. Or maybe we even have ideas for another person in the group. There is the difficulty with going outside of the country because of the language barrier. So Bocconi, this business school Milan, they happen to all be speaking English, but that's not typical, and it's just more difficult. We have everybody here at J&J. We have our genius students and our brilliant faculty, so we could do this here. So I have a Padlet. So, but what I can do, just for those of you who are not familiar with what Padlet looks like, this is the example of the one that I'll be using for this next project. I made this in literally 30 seconds. You just pick a background. I created categories, and the students just literally go this and then write their response and hit send. It's that easy. I can suggest that you make one Padlet for everything, because having separate Padlets gets confusing for students. They submit something in the wrong place. You can get rid of that just by having one Padlet. And there's other techniques, like you can freeze it if you want people to stop submitting or different things like that. But for the most part, it is super easy, user-friendly. Just ask students to make sure they spell their name inside of the post. And other than that, it's really simple. This is one of the most simple things that we use. It's not bright space. It's really user-friendly. Yes, Jesse?
I could actually edit to the Padlet, but there was one thing from my group that I wanted to share that Mindy shared. I had realized, as everyone was sharing, that there's more interdisciplinary content than we realize as we go throughout. And it came up because we're three psychologists out of five, but even our subjects are completely different. So we talked about different things like history and criminal justice, and then later working with families and art therapy. So all types of different things. And Mindy had the suggestion that once a semester, we take our class out into the real world on some sort of field trip. And so just what you're saying, Pamela, about the connecting the history of what was happening at the time, I thought that this was a great physical way to get the students engaged in it. So thanks, Mindy. I wanted to share it to everyone because I thought it was great.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And just as a side pitch, I know everyone knows about it, but the art gallery that's on L3 in our own building, I take my classes every semester. They love that. It is difficult with a super big class, so I don't know that I can bring the 120 class all at once again because they can't hear what people are explaining. But any regular sized class, it was like ends up being the highlight of the whole semester. I'm like, what about me? I was here every 15 weeks, but no, it's the art gallery. So thank you.
Yeah, that's actually a very good idea. And also what you said, Jesse, even within, Hannah and Monica can tell you, within the sciences department, we are each doing our own thing. So even that is cool. If you go to your neighbor's laboratory and say, show me some of the things you're working on. Because a lot of times in the real world, these sciences have to go together. So it's also a really good experience if you can already do that within the college. So yeah, super good. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions, comments?
Can I add one more thing? Right. I love all this interdisciplinary thinking. It's so fun. In case people don't know, I also wanted to mention that our interdisciplinary studies department has team taught courses every semester. And one thing that I would highly recommend for everybody, particularly newer faculty, but all faculty, is teaching a class or two in that department. They are always, right, there's a core of full-time faculty, but they always have adjuncts or full-time professors cycling through. I think of it as like teacher training. Because when you're teaching with somebody through the whole semester, you really have to be very thoughtful and intentional about your teaching. I learned a lot from the people that I taught with, and I think they learned a lot from me. I just think you become a better teacher through the process. So I recommend it highly to everyone. I'm going to write in the chat the name of the chair, Susanna Crowder, who's a historian. But they welcome people coming through, and I think people should give it a shot.
Thank you so much, Alison. Yeah, that's super useful. I, for one, will contact her for sure.
Me too.
Can I ask like one question for you guys? So do you do this the whole semester, or it's one assignment that you choose? Like, what do you choose to do? Do you choose to stick together an entire semester, right? And essentially you're co-teaching, but you're not really like co-teaching, right? On paper. So are you taking it, as one project at a time, or do you plan a whole semester of an activity or, of a incorporated learning lesson?
I'll suggest especially the first time you do it, have it just be an assignment and it starts and it stops. Because if it ends up being like a bit chaotic or annoying, it just ends. So just one assignment. But with my seniors, I did have it go the entire semester, but we had plotted out by this point you do this, by this point you do this, and then they were presenting at the end of the semester. So it kind of made sense to build up to the point. But for something like Padlets where you're sharing ideas, you could do this over a month and a half or a month. So I just do assignments. And they are fun. It's usually like them.
Perhaps, Monica, to start with, you could just start with one class per semester where you go into someone else's class and they come into your class, or both together at the same time, I guess, just to see how that goes and how you feel about it. And how you can also, of course, incorporate that assignment into the syllabus and voicing that to the students.
I'm looking at my colleague over there that teaches the same level bios. I do chem, so she knows. She already knows.
Cool. Anyone else before we head out? Well, I think we have the link also for the Padlet. So I see already Zabi wrote there. So if you're interested and you want to collaborate, maybe that's a cool way to start, seeing everyone else's disciplines. And yeah, I would just like to thank everyone, especially my co-chair Pamela, for this super cool session.
Thank you everybody for coming. This was fun. We were so happy to even talk about it and then so excited. So many people signed up and I don't know, I'm looking forward to maybe working with some of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
You're
much.
very
Thank you,
good.
distinguished teachers.
Thank you.